You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Quick reminder, per usual, to go and smash the like button, jump in the comment section down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really helps me out in a massive way, as I'm now on the climb to 3,000 subscribers. And last but certainly not least, got to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app or check out FanDuel.com right now to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, happy Tuesday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Like yesterday, even more so probably than yesterday, hope everyone is staying bundled up here on Tuesday as frigid temperatures once again peruse the Chicagoland area. I believe last time I was outside, it was -2, so yeah, not good. On the bright side, does look like we're going to be getting some temperatures up into the 40s starting on Sunday or Monday, which is going to be feeling like t-shirt weather at that point in time. So hope everyone is bunkering down and trying to make it through these last couple of days through the freeze. Before I get into my first 2025 NHL Draft prospect update, do want to get to something real quick here. As some of you have maybe noticed over the last couple of days, I have been using a new microphone for these past 2 episodes. And if you're someone who's noticed the change, whether good or bad, if you think I sound better or worse, make sure to go and let me know down below in the comment section. I do all of these episodes for you, the great viewers and listeners out there, and always want to sound as good as possible. So if you've noticed a difference whatsoever, go and let me know your 2 cents down below in the comment section. But to open things up on the show here today, Blackhawks fans, as I teased on yesterday's episode, with the Hawks sadly firmly being in the mix of the Tankathon standings once again here this year with just 27 games left on the schedule, I wanted to start getting into some updates on the top prospects in the 2025 NHL draft class, mainly the big 4 that have kind of cemented themselves at the top of this year's class, and just get into some updates on how their seasons have been going up to this point, as well as some updates on their draft stock according to a few of the top draft scouts, websites, and analysts out there in the industry. And starting things off here today is none other than James Hagens, the man who, going back to the beginning of this season and probably even back in November, who I thought was going to wind up being the first player selected in this year's draft. But yeah, that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case anymore, as Matthew Schaefer has emerged as pretty much the clear-cut #1 at this point, it seems, when you go and look at most of the big-time mock draft websites and even some of the, scouts and analysts who put out regular content and prospect rankings, updates, and whatnot. If you go look at their stuff, most of them have Matthew Schaefer going at #1 at this point in time. And I will be getting to Matthew Schaefer on Locked On Blackhawks. It'll probably be either later this week or early on next week. Not exactly sure of the scheduling yet, but the reason why I wanted to get to James Hagens and the 2 other forwards inside the big 4 of the 2025 class first is because that's obviously the biggest need in the Blackhawks prospect pool at this point, is another high-end forward along with Connor Bedard. Now, there is still the chance the Blackhawks walk away with the #1 overall pick, and, they're certainly going to have a decision on their hands if that winds up being the case. However, can't really expect that to happen, and should they not walk away with the first overall pick, they're very, very likely going to be taking a forward. So starting off with James Hagens on today's show, he is now listed at 5'11" and about 176 pounds, up from 5'10", 170 pounds, which is what he was listed at going into his freshman season, plays the center ice position, and turned 18 years old back in November, which is, I think, a little bit noteworthy. Somewhat older for this year's class. For reference, Macklin Celebrini is only 5 months older than James Hagens, although Macklin and Connor Bedard were both kind of outliers, super young, both 17 years old when they get drafted. So I don't want to make it seem like James Hagens is overtly old or anything for his class, but it is worth noting that he was already 18 before going into his freshman season, whereas Macklin Celebrini was 17 for the entire year. But for Hagens, he played for the United States Development Program these last 2 seasons before joining on with Boston College, had 47 points, 18 goals, and 29 assists as a 17-year-old in 26 USHL games. So had a lot of success at that level, and we've seen obviously, the U.S. development program is its own thing, but we've seen the Blackhawks take a lot of players from the USHL under Kyle Davidson's leadership. In total, James Hagens walked away last year with 102 points in 58 games. And so far in his freshman season with Boston College, who once again is one of the top teams in the entire country, he's accumulated 31 points, 8 goals, and 23 assists in 29 games. Maybe not the level of goal scoring you wanted to see out of James Hagens as a freshman, but still well over a point per game. Also had 9 points, 5 goals, and 4 assists in 7 games for the United States at the U20 World Juniors, where he helped them win a gold medal, and it was actually his second gold medal that he's won at the World Juniors. The first one, though, coming at the U18 World Juniors, where he put up some video game type of numbers. But it's been a rather sharp draft year for James Hagens, getting into where some of the top draft scouts and analysts have him ranked at this point in time. Starting things off as Elite Prospects, who has Hagens at number 2. Bob McKenzie has Hagens at 2 as well. Craig Button has him the lowest of this group at number 4. McKean's Hockey, like McKenzie and Elite Prospects, has Hagens at number 2. Chris Peters is the first to have Hagens ranked number 1 in this year's class. Daily Faceoff has him at 2. Sportsnet also has him at 2, and then Dauber Prospects, to round things out like Chris Peters, has him atop the class. And those are the primary sources that I use when going through my main NHL draft profiles that I'll get to here in the summer. This isn't going to be my full deep dive on James Hagens, by the way. I know in the comment section I always get, give me your draft rankings, give me your mock drafts, give me your certain player profiles, and I promise I will be getting there this summer, but we still got some things to play out throughout the rest of the year. I'd like to know what at least the lottery is going to be before really hammering in on the specificities of these prospects and pinpointing the differences between one another. So this is just going to be kind of a broad overview of how the Big Four in terms of the 2025 draft class seasons have gone thus far. But yeah, most of these scouts and analysts have James Hagens either at number 1 or number 2 in this year's class, and for good reason. I mean, he's a very good, smart, two-way center who plays well on the defensive side of things and makes an effort in that area, which, you're going to have to be if you want to be a top line or at least top 6 center at the NHL level that your coach trusts in all the big moments. Yeah, the goal scoring hasn't been up to snuff for James Hagens from what we saw. It wasn't like he was a prolific goal scorer like Bedard or Celebrini, but it still hasn't been at the level that I think a lot of people wanted to see. But the playmaking has been exquisite. The vision, the IQ, it's been on full display. And for the most part for BC, at least so far here in 2025, he's been centering their second line, so he hasn't been playing with Ryan Leonard or Gabe Perreault. Yeah, I know he's getting looks with those guys on the power play, and the coaching staff is giving him opportunities, right? But the fact that he's driving his own line and still over a point per game as a freshman on one of the best teams in the country, making an impact against bigger and older competition. James Hagens is having a very sound draft season, and I wind up seeing him at this point in time. I think he's either going to get selected second or third. It's just ultimately going to depend upon what the draft order shapes up to be, because should a team who's picking second overall really need a center iceman, I think James Hagens shapes up to be the safest center iceman in this year's draft class. But now should a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, who don't necessarily need a center, they just need some game breakers in the lineup and in the top 6 alongside Connor Bedard, I think that's where someone like Michael Misa could become very interesting, who's lighting it up in the OHL this year, has 50 goals, just like Nick Lardis, although he's a year younger. And thinking about having Misa, Lardis, and Connor Bedard, whether, Nick Lardis pans out, those are just 3 prolific goal scorers all in the same prospect pool. I think that's going to be very intriguing for the Chicago Blackhawks. And spoiler alert, Michael Misa will be the next 2025 NHL draft prospect I will be doing, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But James Hagens is a very, very intriguing prospect, and I think, like I said, he winds up being the second or third overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft. But there are my thoughts and a quick update on James Hagens so far in his freshman season with Boston College. Should be fun to follow along with him and all the Blackhawks prospects who are playing for top 25 teams with national championship aspirations in the NCAA as we start to creep towards the month of March. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll get into some Hawks updates as practice resumed this afternoon at Fifth Third Arena. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because with FanDuel, you can now place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay right in on the action. And if you're someone who's looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. And as my followers on X have probably seen, for the hockey side of things, I love to parlay an anytime goal scorer with the under or over, kind of based on the historical data of the matchups between those two teams. But there's loads of options out there for whatever you want to bet on. And right now, new customers can get $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins by just visiting FanDuel.com in order to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com, or you can also go and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to get your shot at $150 worth of bonus bets. So what are you waiting for? Go and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment 2, the Blackhawks return to practice at Fifth Third Arena. A nice little afternoon skate for the fellas, which I'm sure they greatly enjoyed instead of having to get there, at like 9 or 9:30 a.m. No, they got to have a nice little afternoon stroll, probably woke up a little late in a rare 2:30-ish practice down at Fifth Third Arena, as of course they're still 4 days away from officially returning to game action when they take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. But lots to get to here today as far as the Blackhawks returning to the ice. First and foremost, Ethan Del Mastro was recalled from the Rockford IceHogs. No real surprise there. I talked about this when he was sent down prior to the Four Nations faceoff. I expected the Blackhawks to call him right back up. They just wanted to consistently give him reps and also kind of help out with the D-core down there in Rockford, which worked out nicely. The IceHogs have actually tallied 3 consecutive wins now here, I believe. And I've thought Del Mastro has handled himself well through his first 6 NHL games so far this year. So definitely want to be giving him more looks down the stretch of the season. However, it is interesting that Del Mastro was recalled here today because ahead of practice, Louis Crevier, who is still in concussion protocol from that hit he suffered against the Florida Panthers a week or so prior to the Four Nations faceoff break, was seen on the ice. Good news for Louis Crevier, skating by himself prior to Blackhawks practice. Did not take part in the official practice setting, but seems to be trending in the right direction. And head coach Anders Sorensen after practice even said there's a chance that Louis Crevier returns to the lineup on Saturday in Columbus. So with that being the case, I think we got to go and take a little bit of an updated look at the Blackhawks blue line, because we know Seth Jones and Alec Martinez, they've been working really nicely together as the top pairing since both of them have gotten fully healthy. Alex Vlasic and Connor Murphy have shaped together as a pairing since Louis Crevier has been out of the lineup. That makes 4 defensemen. And then we have Nolan Allen as well, who was oddly getting scratched pretty regularly before the break, which was something I didn't agree with, but that makes 5. You get Ethan Del Mastro's call up, that makes 6. And then you can't forget old man TJ Brodie, who actually wasn't at practice today due to family matters. So in all seriousness, hope everything is okay with the Brodies, but sounds like it's all good as he's going to expected to be back on the ice for practice tomorrow. So with that being the case, that gives the Blackhawks, with Ethan Del Mastro now on the active roster, 7 defensemen. And then should Louis Crevier return on Saturday or whenever it's going to be, that's going to give the team 8 defensemen on their active roster. Now, they can fit that in. They still would only have 23 players on their active roster, which is the maximum amount of players you could have. So they could easily fit the 8 active defensemen. It just isn't something you regularly see on an NHL roster. And the Blackhawks, and I think most teams try to avoid that because usually you just prefer guys to be getting regular game action down at the AHL level. So we'll see if Del Mastro goes back, if he's only going to be up for a couple of games, if Louis Crevier is surprisingly going back down to Rockford. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work, but again, at this point in time, it's just become abundantly clear that the Blackhawks and general manager Kyle Davidson should not have signed both Alec Martinez and TJ Brodie in the offseason, and giving Brodie, for him to be the one that got the 2-year deal, was absolutely atrocious. Also, bit of a noteworthy tidbit from practice. Jason Dickinson, unfortunately, due to that ankle injury, was not out there and is still about 2 to 3 weeks away from returning. He is still, though, on the active roster. So, like, even with Jason Dickinson activating, Louis Crevier would only give them 23 players. So there is still the possibility Colton Dock, who was reassigned to Rockford prior to the Four Nations face-off, like Del Mastro, will be coming back up as well. Maybe Cole Gutman, who's been exquisite for the IceHogs and is a point-per-game player at the AHL level once again. Should the Blackhawks want to add a center to their NHL roster with Jason Dickinson out, I think he's a pretty good option for a call-up. We'll see if that winds up happening, but there is all the latest from the Blackhawks' first practice back from the Four Nations face-off. Coming up in just a moment here before I close things out on today's show, I'll get into some of the updates we heard from NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman recently regarding future international tournaments. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. That goes the same for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's financial future secure. And SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. And what sets SelectQuote apart, a little bit of a tongue twister there, is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique and specific needs. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. So go and get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Again, check out selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today in order to get started. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates down the stretch of the season with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3. If you've liked what you've seen from the Four Nations face-off so far, which I think all of us hockey fans have, and not even hockey fans, just sports fans in general, which has been the best part about the Four Nations face-off. Hockey is actually being marketed properly. Like, I feel like we haven't seen this from the NHL, and you know, they made the right decision in going about this tournament, but I feel like they kind of stumbled into this massive level of success. I mean, the games have been just fantastic. The players have truly been what's made the tournament, but just to see the NHL like on the forefront of the sporting world right now, people taking notice how electric these games have been, it's been absolutely awesome. And compared to, you know, like the NBA All-Star Game and the slam dunk competition and whatnot, as I joked about yesterday, the NHL has just dunked on them. The MLB All-Star Game, still, you know, is very fun to watch. And I think people do tune into the Summer Classic regularly, but it doesn't have like the same level juice as what it did back in the day, maybe in the steroid era when guys were just absolutely blasting home runs and Sammy Sosa was hitting them like 550 at Miller Park up in Milwaukee. And then, you know, the NFL Pro Bowl has just turned into an absolute joke. So this is just a perfect opportunity for hockey to come in and shine and be the predominant talk of the sporting world here in February when there's just not really all that much going on. And the best part about it is we get a rematch, obviously, of the United States and Canada for the championship of the Four Nations face-off in Boston on Friday, but also this style of tournament isn't going anywhere. As Commissioner Gary Bettman last week held a media presser to give kind of some updates about more international best-on-best hockey coming in the future. First, of course, the NHL already announced its commitment to taking a break again next February, which is someone who hosts a Blackhawks podcast that runs daily for, 8 to 9 months of the year. I greatly appreciate a little bit of a break in February, as well as an opportunity to watch the hockey back in the Winter Olympics. I sounded like Chance the Rapper saying, let's go and do that hockey there for a second. Seeing hockey back in the Winter Olympics along with the break is going to be absolutely epic. NHL players being back in the Winter Olympics is only right. You think back to 2014 in Sochi, when Canada won their second consecutive gold medal. The 2010 Vancouver Olympics are some of the best hockey memories that I have as a young kid growing up, even though the United States came on the wrong end of that gold medal game against Canada. Sidney Crosby with the infamous golden goal. I'll never forget the pride that I had watching Patrick Kane in that tournament and be a part of the game-tying goal that Zach Parise scored in the final minute to absolutely shut that building up in Vancouver. It gives me goosebumps and still does to this day when I go back and watch it. So only right that the NHL players are back in the Olympics. Again, another no-brainer for the NHL. But on top of that, Bettman announced that the NHL is also committed to another World Cup of Hockey in 2028, which Bettman has said, the Four Nations that's going on this year is just an appetizer to what we're going to see at the World Cup of Hockey. We'll wait and see about that, but I'm not exactly sure. The full details haven't been released for the World Cup of Hockey. I'm not sure how the rosters are going to work, if it's going to be the same North America style and whatnot. But more information is going to start flooding out about the World Cup of Hockey here soon. I know there's going to be bidding set between North American and European cities to be the host for that tournament. And then once again in 2030, the NHL players are going to be back in the Winter Olympics in the French Alps. So we get the Four Nations this year, Olympics next year, maybe back to the regular All-Star game in 2027. We'll see the World Cup of Hockey in 2028. Again, a pause in 2029, but then to be part of the Olympics in 2030, it is going to be an epic next 5 years of hockey. In addition to the salary cap continuing to go up, more financial freedom for all of these teams, players starting to get paid more, all good things in terms of the direction that hockey is moving in. I'm super excited about it. Go and let me know your thoughts on all of this down below in the comment section. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Smash the like, comment down below. Help me out and reach my goal to 3,000 subscribers. Go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can tune into the show on the go, whether you're going to or from work, maybe just on your lunch break, wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Until the next episode, everyone, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Stay warm, and I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.